Sean Tier, Chief of the Harris County DA's Office Vehicular Crimes Division. At 10 o'clock this morning, we had a SWAT officers with the HPD that were traveling westbound here on Hempstead Road. They had, from a number of witnesses, the green light as they were going through this intersection. Directly south of this intersection, as you can see behind me, there are train tracks. Those train arms were down with the red lights flashing. We had a Lexus that was traveling eastbound, or northbound, I'm sorry, on West Little York Road. They disregarded those train arms, drove around them, and then disregarded the red light here at this intersection. They proceeded into the intersection, and they had a head-on collision with the SWAT officers in the black Tahoe. A number of people were transported. The SWAT officer that was driving the car was transported with chest pains by another HPD SWAT officer to the hospital. As we understand it right now, he's going to make a full recovery. He was suffering from some chest pains. The passenger in that Lexus was transported with serious injuries. We're still checking to see whether or not she's going to make it. The driver of the Lexus also sustained some injuries and was taken to the hospital. The driver of the Lexus was evaluated for intoxication by a drug recognition expert with HPD. There were no signs of intoxication that were found. That doesn't mean that those aren't there. We're going to do a number of forensic tests to ensure that that's the case, but as of right now, we don't believe that intoxication played a role in this. That being said, the driver acted in what is a pretty obviously reckless way. And so as a result of that, as it stands right now, I've accepted charges of reckless aggravated assault on the driver of that Lexus. That's a second-degree felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. And obviously, if the passenger in that car does pass away, then those charges will likely be upgraded to a different charge. That's really kind of what we have. The charges are for the driver of the Lexus. The complainant was the passenger in the car that the driver is being charged with reckless aggravated assault. The passenger obviously has no control when you're in the passenger seat of how the car is being operated. The officer in this case, based on a number of witnesses that were at this intersection, they're all in unison that he had a green light. And it wasn't one that had just turned green, it was a long green light, meaning that the red light that the person disregarded was a stale red light. So in a very short span, that driver disregarded 2 emergency and traffic control devices. And because of that, we have a woman who's fighting for her life. As far as we know right now, the SWAT officer was not on a call. We don't believe that speed played a role in this case, in that there was any excessive speed on either side. If that had been the case with 2 cars that are as heavy as these, we would have seen much more significant front end damage on both. So we don't believe that the officers were traveling above the speed limit by any large number. As far as we know, they weren't responding to a call right now. But this case is one that we have to dig well into. Before we present this to even a grand jury to ask for an indictment on the aggravated assault case, we're going to have to know the exact speeds of both cars, and we're going to have the ability to do that. We're going to have to know the toxicology of everyone that was behind the wheel. We have the ability to do that. We're going to know the final ultimate outcome for the passenger to determine what the appropriate charge is that eventually gets presented to a grand jury. But, in a situation like this, disregarding 2 traffic control devices, one of them designed to tell you that there is a train coming, and having that result in serious injury at the very least for someone's unacceptable.
So the officer is not a complainant. You're not charging the driver with anything for the officer.
Correct. And again, depending on what the final medical records and results are for the officer, there may be potential charges for this driver regarding him. But thankfully right now, we're we have the understanding that he's going to be okay. So we're going to wait before we add any additional charges regarding the officer to find out what his final diagnosis is. So there was only one person in the SWAT car, but another SWAT officer was in the very close vicinity and transported that officer really quickly to the hospital.
Can you explain how it was a head-on collision in this divided lane?
Yeah. So when you see crashes like this, typically you're going to see one or both of the cars take an attempt at an evasive maneuver right at the very last second. When you notice someone has run a stoplight, or I ran a stoplight, and then you get hit. So what looks like it could be a T-bone, once we get the steering input from both cars, we're going to know exactly what the point of impact for both and the angle of impact for both is. That's something that you see a number of them behind me, both with Houston Police Department and with our DA's office. We have crash reconstructionists. They're the ones that do all the physics, put in all of the science, and eventually tell us exactly how the crash happened. But as it stands right now, we have a very good idea of the way that they collided. No, the woman was the passenger. We have an adult female passenger who is the one with serious injuries right now. The driver was an adult male. They were headed northbound, coming from that train intersection or the train crossing, going northbound on West Little York. The officers were coming from this direction, heading westbound on Hempstead. So the driver's a male, and he is able to communicate. We did do all of our standardized field sobriety tests with him, those that we were able to when he was at the hospital. He is cooperative. He's been talking to the officers. His version of events in some ways are what we're seeing on the road here, and some of them aren't. But by the end of this case, we're going to get to the bottom of all of that. Chief Cantu?
Unless anybody has any questions. The officer's been on 13 years with the department, and once again, he's in stable condition. It's non-life-threatening. He's 13 years with the department, and he works under SWAT, in the SWAT division.
Yeah. So we actually had two horrific, tragic crashes last night. The first one was at FM 2920 and Kirkendall Road. We had an intoxicated driver that rear-ended a car that had a mother, father, and a 3-year-old in the car. The 3-year-old is still fighting for his life. That driver's been charged with 2 counts of intoxication assault and 3 counts of failure to stop and render aid because he ran. We were able to catch him quickly and bring him back. He was highly intoxicated is what we determined at that point. So we're waiting to finalize and figure out whether or not that little 3-year-old's going to pull through. That's the first scene from last night. The second scene, the one at Aldine Bender that the Harris County Sheriff's Department worked that involved an on-duty Houston Police Department officer, there's nothing additional that we have yet. As I said at the scene there, it's a case that we're going to have to dig all the way into because, you know, there's really poor lighting out there. The lighting that is out in that exact location doesn't help pedestrians trying to cross there. There's no crosswalk. There's no signal to allow people to cross safely there. But in no way is that saying that individual should have had to walk as far as he would have either way to get to a safe spot. So I think road design played a real issue in that case. There are a lot of factors that we're going to have to look at before that case is finally figured out. You know, it's tragic every single time that somebody loses their life on the roads of Harris County, and it happens way too often. We don't have that definitively yet what their relationship is. We know they're very close in age and they're both adults, but you know that it's too early for us to be able to definitively give a relationship between the two. She was transported by ambulance to the hospital, and I think part of that is because of the severity of her injuries. That was something that, as you can tell based on how she's fighting for her life right now, that's not something that an officer has the capability of putting her in a car and getting her to the hospital. So yeah, that one was one that had to be waited for EMS to get here and transport.
And I just want to add that the officer was still on the scene when the woman was transported. She was transported first.
Anybody else on this one?
Thank you. We're good. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sean. You're the best.